Hey you, welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be answering the Q&A questions from WKNDR Collective's online community, our weekly threads, where our members get to ask questions that get answered in this video. Along in this video, I'm also going to add some common questions and themes that popped up in our first group call. And before we get started, if you're interested in joining WKNDR Collective, check out the information in the description box below. But without further ado, let's get started. And our first question in this video is going to come from Brittany, who said, branding, ... I know what I want, but I'm stumped on how to get the brand there. Any advice? Yes, I have advice for this. Number one, you gotta break it down into simple steps. And initially what you're gonna do is nail down your branding, nail down your messaging, nail down your content, nail down which platforms, and then you're gonna test and repeat this cycle over and over and over again, fine tuning, dropping what doesn't fit, and really zeroing down on what does fit. So what I mean by this is first you need to create your brand templates or your brand guidelines in a template. So you gotta have your colors, you gotta have your fonts, you gotta have your tone, you gotta have your messaging, you gotta have your positioning, you gotta have your mission statement, your values, you gotta have all that information ready to go. And then what you're gonna do is test your messaging. So messaging is important because you gotta understand how you talk and how it connects with the people that you're wanting to connect with. And this can get a little tricky because sometimes we can focus on the actual product and the benefits of it. We can focus on the emotional connection or the transformation that our clients are going to go through. There's so many different aspects that we can put out there and test, but until we know which one our potential clients are most receptive to and engage with, we can't really advance. So once you figure out your messaging though, what you're going to do is figure out what kind of content really hits that. And the gap is sometimes we go from throwing it in our stories to test the messaging, to fine tuning it as actual content and posts once we understand it. And then from there, the platforms are key. So Brittany's in a B2B space, which I would definitely tell her to focus on LinkedIn because she focuses with financial companies, helping them grow and scale, implement systems and processes to exit. So 100% to me, that would be LinkedIn and YouTube would probably be the best spots to capture these people. And what you're gonna do is test those platforms and see which is the most receptive to you. And even in saying that, those are two of the hardest platforms to get started on, but once you create consistent content and figure out your messaging, it gets so much easier. And essentially that's the last stage here, is to endlessly put out content, probably 3 to 5 pieces a week, and 3 of those are gonna be value-based to every one call to action or ask. And what you're gonna do is just go through this cycle time after time again. So once you have your branding established, work on that messaging. Once you understand how your clients are receptive and talking to you, then you're gonna focus which platforms they're most receptive on. You're gonna post to those platforms. And the recipe or a content strategy is that create 3 pieces of value to 1 ask in that order, and do that every week and see if they're engaging more or less, seeing which posts stand out, because some posts will stand out compared to others. And then you'll be like, yes, that's working, and then double down on that and figure out how to get more efficient with it, because over time, your branding just gives you your consistency to continue to put out that same message so that you're not confusing your audience. And then over time, you're fine tuning that messaging and figuring out what content that clientele is most receptive to and what kind of videos and how often you have to put out those videos in order to get a client on a call. And then how many clients on the call actually convert to your service. That would be my overall recipe. Another thing I want to throw in here is she asked how. I always ask who, and that comes from the book Who, Not the How. And it is really focused on, if we ask how, we don't trust that it'll really happen. But when we start asking who, there's so many people that can help us with each aspect of what we're looking for. There's marketers and content creators who specialize in branding and marketing like me. I would say that would be a good one. There's other people in the space who have done what you're doing, or finding, strategic partnerships that could open a door to a client. Or maybe you act as like an adjunct in on one of their jobs to learn a little bit more. But there's all these key people that are probably around you and in your network that you already know, that you're probably being asked to lean into and really ask that person to use their skill set, their unique skill set, to help you advance to the next stage, if that makes sense. And sometimes in entrepreneurship too, we get in this like self-reliant phase. I know it's been a big part of my journey of like, let's see, the universe, I wouldn't say like I wanted to do it all myself. I was looking for help, I was looking for assistance, I was looking for partnerships, but they just weren't showing up. And what happened for my path is I had to go fully independent and really lean into myself. But in doing so, now the doors to partnerships have opened. So it's a kind of in my process where I'm at right now, is getting out of I have to do it all myself and finding those strategic people that want to help me and aligns with their mission and overlaps with my mission, and we can work together to get each other to that next spot. If that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. That's a loaded answer, but thank you for asking that question, because I think that is a very valuable question for anybody who's watching this content to know. Let's get on to the next point. Is what holds people back from showing up fully and authentically online in their business, and how we can move through it. Whew. This is a loaded question, so we can make this really simple by going back to the original 3 fears of being human. You have fear of the unknown, fear of success, and fear of judgment. And what I believe is why people don't put themselves out there is essentially these 3 fears pop up continuously in our life. And essentially, like, let's go to the biggest fear of like fear of success. This is essentially like subconsciously, you might not be aware of this, but essentially like anywhere in your brain, you could be like, if I'm successful, that means the people I'm around right now who are my friends and my family and all these people I'm surrounded with, I might have to let them go. And in being successful, that's a selfish move that I have to let them go to the next level. But actually how this works is, it's really cool, is like those people that are surrounding you now, if you're afraid of letting them go, is essentially like, they were important in your life to get you here, but we do outgrow people and relationships. And what we have to understand is like, not in a sense like those people are replaceable. Everybody is replaceable, but those friends got us here. And in order to go up here, we might have to get a new set of friends or new people that were around to grow and accelerate. So what we have to do is kind of like, it's that we don't have to let these people go completely, but these are important people and an important part of our journey in our life. But in order to accelerate to the next level, we might have to find those new people. And that is just a part of being human and living a life of growing and adapting, because if we're not growing and adapting, we're dying. And obviously our business is a reflection of us. The second one is fear of the unknown. So essentially what happens here is we get in this loop, and even though, say for instance, like content, as a content creator, I struggle with this, is like, I knew these montage videos were easy for me to create, but they just weren't growing. And though I knew I needed to add voiceovers, talk to cameras, and all these different sound design aspects, I was just in this loop of like, even though I know I need that, I'm not gonna do it because I'm comfortable doing this. And even though I know it's not successful, I know what the outcome will be. Versus like, if I add in the voiceovers, if I do a talk to camera, if I add in sound design, I don't know what that's gonna do. So I don't know if it's gonna work. Maybe I'm completely wasting my time. And that's like what our ego will tell us, versus like the reality of it is, making those changes of talk to camera, voiceover, sound designs. My videos started performing awesome, but it took that leap of faith of being like, I could be completely wasting my time here, changing these things that I know I need to change that'll help it perform better, or I can continually stay in that loop of knowing what will happen if I do this, which is very self-sabotaging. And then the third fear is fear of judgment. And this is I think this is honestly one of the biggest ones, because essentially what happens in our life is, number one, if we're different, we got picked on and we stood out as a kid and others took advantage of that, but it wasn't anything against us. It was just like, they were like, you're different and we know it. And that's something awesome to have in entrepreneurship. Along with that though, what happened is everybody has a moment, if they don't share or put themselves out there on social media, they have lower confidence, they have lower self-worth, which can be to bullying and being different growing up. Or it can be like one day everybody has this experience that we put ourselves out there. We were vulnerable. We shared something that we really wanted to be well received, and we weren't well received. We were essentially like, we were taking our first steps out into the road and a bus comes and hits us and run us over. And we went from like, I'm excited to share this with everybody to like, oh my God, don't look at me. This is so embarrassing. And it's really those one or a couple of those key moments in our life have really impacted our subconscious belief, and it holds us back from putting ourselves out there vulnerably, because we're kind of like that fear of the unknown is like, we know what will happen if we put ourselves out there. But if we lean into that fear of the unknown, that was just one time in our life. And if we can start putting ourselves out there, start getting that confidence and support from a community around us, and we strategically put ourselves out there too, because sometimes when we put ourselves out there, we aren't doing it in a way that is well received. We're talking too much about ourselves and what we want to share with the world, instead of pivoting it to an angle of like the client's perspective, our future customer's perspective. What problems are they having? How can we put it out there in a way in front of them that it really invites them to understand what we're sharing and how we can help them, and what pain points and what problems are they struggling with that we can present, that we have a solution to, in a way that they know we have that solution, and they're eager to reach out and really engage with us because they're searching, we have the answer that they're searching for. So altogether, like the fear of success, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of judgment hold us back from putting out that content. And it can be from one key moment in our lives that truly embarrassed us or truly made us feel rejected. But it's really about coming back home and knowing that that was an instance in our life that we're meant to grow from, and growing from that and coming back to ourselves and knowing that nobody's really trying to make fun of us. Nobody's trying to reject us. Nobody's just trying to judge us. All that information is just feedback on ways that we can get better of how to put out our message and get more engagement and be more receptive to the people that we're trying to put that message out in front of and really help out on our journey. Whew, that was a good one. Thank you to whoever, or that was actually a question from the call that I brought up. And this is another overlapping theme that I saw on the call was, how do you manage the uncertainty and overwhelm of pivoting from a traditional path into something new that is purpose-driven? And I would say number one, and the most important is, if you're like me and on this journey, this will probably resonate with a lot of people, is I tried the traditional path and I hated it. And it was to the degree that I was working a 9-to-5 essentially as a nurse. I had a girlfriend, I had a car, I had all my bills covered, I had everything in life. And I remember this moment of like just sitting there one day and was like, this isn't it. You know, like I have everything that is supposed to make me happy and it's not it. It's just extremely depressing. And I remember that moment was my first year in nursing. I was sitting there and was like, I got to do this for the next 30 years. I'm going to be heavily depressed. I'm going to have tons of illnesses and ailments, or I'm going to commit suicide because this is not what I came here to live in this life. So, and what that is really like, if you have that moment, that is where you kind of get that thought of like, what else is there out there? And in knowing that the traditional path isn't for you, you know that that's a gauge of things not to do. So you can take everything you hate and invert it and flip it and start creating your own systems and processes of what does work for you. And what this takes is a ton of experimenting. This is 100% going off into the unknown and figuring out what works best for you. And what I would say is something that's very key is, number one, like, you got to experiment with your structure of your schedule. What works for you? You know, for me, I can't do the, working 9-to-5 every day and doing that myself. What I have to do is I break it up into 3 simple things of personal brand, my online community, and client work. Those are the 3 anchors, no matter what I do every day. And then I break up my schedule into modularities, where it's like each is about 90 minutes a day. I'll work on it. And where I strategically work on it in my day change. Some days I'll start with my personal brand or weekender, no matter what client works in the middle. And then, for instance, on Mondays, I'll do strategies. Tuesdays, I'll film. Wednesdays, I'll edit. Thursday, Fridays are overlap days. And even within those days, 3 to 5 every day is calls and collabs. Like, that's a system that I've learned from essentially building what works for me and what didn't work for me. And it's not something that you'll just figure out overnight. What you have to do is continually test it. And you have to be willing to think about it as experiments, because you don't know where this end is and this end is until you go there. But once you do, then you understand where the center is. And once you understand where the center is, that's where you're most productive. So it's all about, number one, just letting go of what everybody else is doing. And you have to know that you got to figure out what works best for you. You got to understand where your time's most valuable. You got to understand where you can delegate. You got to understand the budgets. You got to understand, as a whole, I think the biggest key here is just to assess your daily life with no judgment. And what I mean by that is there's an app like Toggle that you can use, or you can just simply like track your day and put it in your calendar as you live through it. But essentially what you do is like figure out like when you wake up, how long it takes you to wake up, what task you do in the morning naturally and you're most productive at, what feels right, when are you the most social, when do you need to be by yourself, what takes the most time, what is the most draining to you. With your lifestyle, do you eat 3 meals a day? Or are you somebody who intermittently fasts? Like, you just got to take all this stuff. But what happens is if you just like let yourself naturally do it for a few days and keep track of it, you can understand what you're naturally doing, because procrastination is the soul's wisdom. That comes from who, not the how as well. But when we procrastinate, we tend to, it's our soul's higher wisdom telling us that time and energy is best used somewhere else. And we naturally go there and do that. And if you understand that model, then essentially, when you start procrastinating, pay attention to what you're doing, what time you're doing it, and why you're doing it, and what you're avoiding, because typically what we avoid is what we need to delegate. And the sooner we start delegating what drains us, the more energy we can apply to the things that were most useful and valuable with our time. Whew. Hopefully that one makes sense. That's a lot. But overall, though, what I would tell anybody is you just have to test it. You have to give yourselves maybe just a week just to kind of go aloof, be whimsical, see the commonalities of everything that's happening, take note of that, and start building your days to work with that energy. Because for instance, I'm a projector, I can't be consistent, but through my inconsistencies, I've created my own consistencies that work better over time. And instead of burning out, trying to do what everybody else is doing, I found my system that works for me. Not only am I efficient, but I'm consistent with it over time. Boom. All right, and then last question here. When you're building your brand or launching something new, how do you keep things simple and actually take action, especially when it feels overwhelming? This question is so key. So number one, overwhelm comes from trying to do too many things at once. And what I do is really focus on one thing per week. And this sounds so cliche, but let me tell you how it works. And that last question and the previous questions kind of stack on this one. So what I do is try to figure out one thing for the week. So for instance, in starting Weekender Collective, first thing was creating brand guidelines. I was like, let's create brand guidelines this week. Great. Got the brand guidelines out. Then I started working on the messaging. This week, let's focus on messaging. Let's film a ton of content talking about Weekender Collective from all these different angles, from the benefits to the transformation to the emotional connection, to what people get, why I'm excited about it, why I built it, case studies of why I built this, just all that stuff. And then from there, next I filmed all that. Then I edited it in a batch content. Then I put it out and I tested it. Then I saw which platforms were the most receptive to it, which ones were the least receptive, took notes, focused down on that content. Then once I got the messaging, people were interested, then I built a landing page and got them on a wait list. Once I got them on the wait list, we did that for about 2 weeks. And then from there, then I focused on launching Weekender Collective. Then we got it launched once we got it sold out. And then I focused on, and in the meantime, I built all the content and stuff. But you see, like, each of those things was 1 week that I focused on. And then each day I put 1 to 2 hours of tasks that would help me achieve that over the week, whether that be 5 days or 7 days. But it's all about just breaking that stuff up into one thing and dividing it over the week. Because even what I'll say is I'll do here is like, Weekender Collective is a second venture off of what I'm already doing as a freelance agency. And as a freelance agency, I have to promote myself and client work. And then we add in Weekender. That's 3 things to focus on, which can be overwhelming, as like completely overwhelming and was last year and the previous years. But what I learned is like to break it up into systems. Every week I have a goal for whether it be my brand, Weekender Collective, or client work, or all 3 of those. But then it's breaking it up into about 1 to 2 hour segments throughout the week that I can nail every day. So then it's just like I'm focusing on each slice of the pie instead of multiple things. And and then what really has been helpful for me is doing singularity to focus on the day. So like Mondays are strategies, Tuesdays are filming, Wednesdays are editing, Thursday and Friday tend to be editing days or overlap from the week, or there's stuff that I'm like, oh, we need to go back and do that. So instead of trying to do a strategy, filming, editing on all these different days and going from personal brand to community to client work, and I'm like, whoa, what's happening? It's just like very systematic, where it's almost like my subconscious knows this pattern, and I'll be working on something. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting bored. Oh yeah, it's 90 minutes. Okay, cool. Let's cut this and move on to the next. And it keeps it refreshing, but it also keeps it systemized so that I'm not all over the place trying to figure out what I'm working on and going from editing where I'm like, really focused in and zeroed in to being like, all right, now I got to talk to camera, which is way two completely different brain spaces. Or, working on a brand where I'm following directions to working on my stuff where I'm creating the direction. You get that? So it's really about taking all the big things and breaking it down. And I'd say create a goal for each bucket for every week, and then breaking up every day into 1 to 2 hour blocks where you're focused on breaking that one goal up into 3 or 5 steps or even 7 steps for the week, so that you're chipping away at it daily. Because I think early on too, something that I saw was I would wake up, or I'd be really good at knocking stuff out one day and would just like go in and get it done. And then 8 hours later, it'd be like, I'm exhausted. And then the next day I'd wake up and I'd be like, dude, I'm burnt out today. Or I'd, be doing so much the previous day that I'm like, what am I working on today? What are we doing? What can I do with my time? And what I do is essentially like escape and be like, all right, well, I don't know what I'm doing today. I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out. So let's go do some stuff to recharge. And then recharging would take 3 days, and it was just like a nightmare versus and it was all from that stress. And now it's like, okay, cool. Every week We have 3 things that we need to focus on. 1 for personal brand, 1 for the community, 1 for client work. Let's break it up over these days, if that makes sense. So overall, guys, thank you so much for these questions. It really helps me understand the focus of how to help Weekender Collective as a whole continue to grow and what resources they need. And my goal with putting out this video is to directly answer the people's questions in the community, and also put these videos out on social media to help other people understand exactly what we're doing in Weekender Collective. Because as a whole, I think it's impactful to answer the questions in the community and put this out there online so that we can attract in other people who will not only help the community, but the community can help grow and start creating a life of passion and fulfillment, creating a lifestyle doing exactly what you love. So guys, if we helped you out on this video, go ahead and give this video a like, drop a comment below, and also subscribe to this channel, as we're going to continue to put out this content every week as we continue to grow and develop Weekender Collective. Peace out, y'all, and see you on the next video.